Hello, friends, and welcome to today's webinar, Native Thriving on Campus, which we are so pleased to be offering in conversation with Pamala Silas and Jasmine Gurneau. Pamala is the Associate Director of Community Outreach and Engagement for the Center for Native American and Indigenous Research at Northwestern University. And Jasmine is the Director of Native American and Indigenous Affairs in the Office of Institutional Diversity and Inclusion, also at Northwestern University. And we'll offer fuller introductions here shortly. I'm so happy to say this webinar is co-sponsored by the Center for Ecological Regeneration and the Stead Center for Ethics and Values, both at Garrett. Just a quick technology reminder, because this is a webinar, those of you who are joining us as participants will be seeing only the featured presenters. And if there's time toward the end of our 90 minutes together, we'll look forward to perhaps a Q&A with both Pamala and Jasmine. And so please note the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And again, if we have time, we'll get to those questions toward the end. So today's webinar is the third in a series that we've offered this academic year as part of the work of Garrett's Indigenous Study Committee, which I'll share more about just in a bit. My name is Tim Eberhardt, and I am the director of the Center for Ecological Regeneration at Garrett, which is aimed missionally at spreading regenerative eco-theological understandings, earth-based religious practices, and cooperative solidarities for the just healing of relationships, both human and more than human, within the Midwest bioregion and beyond. If you'd like to receive communications from the center, you can sign up on the main webpage, which you can access through the link in our chat. So with the founding and the launch of the Center for Ecological Regeneration just about a year ago, the president at Garrett, President Javier Vieira, commissioned the center as its first major initiative to support the work of an Indigenous Study Committee. And the committee was given a series of charges to research the history of Garrett-Evangelical's impact on and relationship to the Indigenous peoples of this bioregion, to highlight Indigenous theological perspectives and practices, to explore potential partnerships with Indigenous-led organizations, to research relevant efforts within not just the United Methodist Church, but within other denominations, and then to return a year later with a report, including a set of recommended actions for reparative responses that the seminary might take up going forward. I'm pleased to say that that committee has been hard at work throughout the year and that we're close to finalizing at least the first draft of our report, which we'll be sharing with the seminary in May. Our hope is that a more public-facing release of that report will be made available by the fall, with perhaps a series of events related. You can learn more about the Indigenous Study Committee by going to the committee's web page. You can read about the news release, and you can also view the two prior webinars, one with Dr. Randy Woodley and the other with Reverend Siobhan Cornell. And with that, let me introduce Dr. Kate Ott, who is director of the Stead Center, to allow her to offer a word of greeting as well.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, thank you, Dr. Eberhardt, for this collaborative opportunity. Pamala and Jasmine, we are grateful to you for your generous sharing of time and wisdom. I'm Dr. Kate Ott, Director of the STED Center. And at the STED Center, we seek to enhance moral communities by addressing relevant, critical justice issues, one conversation at a time. So you can find out more about our work at stedcenter.com, which we've just put in the chat. We'll also be sharing a follow-up conversation with Pamala and Jasmine in a couple of weeks. That will be up on the Instead page of the STED Center. And for those of you who might have missed it, Reverend Dr. Woodley's article on decolonializing theological education from the first lecture in the series is also up on the STED Center website. So we're so grateful to you today for sharing your wisdom, and we look forward to even more to come on the STED Center site. I'd now like to invite Katie Fahey, the Garrett Admissions Officer, to share a welcome with all of us.
Thank you, Dr. Ott and Dr. Eberhardt, for inviting me into this space. We are so excited to have you all here today, and I know that this event is going to be totally transformative for you. I am simply here to share with you that if this event is exciting and as transformative as I think it's going to be, if it leaves you with more questions than answers, if you feel led to learn more, Garrett is here for you. Garrett offers a variety of options for learning, from enrichment courses all the way through doctoral degrees. If you get to the other side of today's event or the series of events and you want to continue exploring theological education, I'd encourage you to reach out to us in the Office of Admissions at Garrett. Our team will be happy to help you discern what your next steps might be. You can reach out to us via email at getadmitted@garrett.edu. Check out our website to learn more about our degree programs, scholarship opportunities, and admissions deadlines. And I'll turn it back to Dr. Eberhardt to introduce our webinar guests today. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Well, I am so pleased to offer a more substantive introduction of our two guests today. I have gotten to know Pamala M. Silas and have come to so deeply appreciate her thoughtfulness through her involvement as one of the members of Garrett's Indigenous Study Committee this past year. In addition to her work at the Center for Native American and Indigenous Research at Northwestern, and my guess is we'll learn something about that, Pamala has long been recognized as a leader on issues of equity, leadership, community development, housing, and education in underrepresented communities. She is an enrolled member of the Menominee Tribe of Wisconsin and a descendant of the Oneida Tribe of Wisconsin. She has a BS in economics from DePaul University and is a certified association executive. Some of her many former positions include the executive director for National American Indian Housing Council, Native American Journalists Association, and prior to forming her own association management and consulting company, she served 8 years as CEO of American Indian Science and Engineering Society's national operation. Within the Chicagoland area, she has served as executive director for Metropolitan Tenants Organization, which led housing campaigns and aggressive direct organizing efforts with low-income tenants. Pamala, again, thank you so much for your time with us today. It is also my pleasure to introduce Jasmine Gurneau, who is a citizen of the Oneida Nation and descendant of the Menominee Nation, both of Wisconsin. Jasmine currently serves as the Director of Native American and Indigenous Affairs in the Office of Institutional Diversity and Inclusion at Northwestern University. And in that role, she leads the development and implementation of university-wide initiatives related to the inclusion of Native American and Indigenous students, faculty, staff, and alumni. Her work includes facilitating stakeholder engagement, serving as a thought leader on campus, and building and sustaining partnerships with tribal communities. Jasmine grew up in Chicago. She earned a Bachelor of Arts in Sociology from DePaul University and a Master of Arts in Learning Sciences from Northwestern University. She currently serves as the board president for the Chicago American Indian Community Collaborative. And she previously served 2 terms as a community representative of the citywide American Indian Education Council for Chicago Public Schools. Jasmine was a 2015 fellow with Cultivate, Women of Color Leadership Program, and was named one of Chicago Scholars' 35 under 35 young leaders making an impact. Well, you can see why we are so excited to have both Pamala and Jasmine with us today. Hard to imagine 2, not just at Northwestern, here in Evanston, within the Midwest, but beyond. Hard to imagine 2 who could speak better to our topic today, Native thriving on campus. So again, if we have time, we'll hope to come to a brief Q&A section at the end. Regardless, let me turn it now to Pamala and Jasmine.
All right, jump in here. Poso Meep, Mwanaweak, Sekate Weaki in it, Suisian. I've just introduced myself using Menominee language, giving you my traditional name as well, which is Sunshine Woman. I am so honored to be here. I feel like, it's fun to tell these stories, and we need to tell the stories because, what has happened here on the Northwestern campus relative to Natives has been just nothing short of an amazing accomplishments and a story to be told. So we're glad to share it, and thanks for having us here. Jasmine.
Thanks. Likewise, thank you so much for inviting us to share a little bit of our story, and it's a pleasure to be presenting alongside Pam. It's been a while, so. With that, I hope folks can see the presentation okay or clearly. As we said, we're here to talk about Natives thriving on campus. But before we begin, we just kind of want to ground the space that we're broadcasting to you from the traditional homelands of the Council of the Three Fires, which include Ojibwe, Potawatomi, Odawa, as well as Ho-Chunk, Miami, Menominee, Sac and Fox, and is still home to a very thriving, active Chicago intertribal Native community, and was the birthplace of the National Congress of American Indians. So that just demonstrates that this area has always and has a long legacy of the exchange of knowledge, ideas, stories, songs, etc. And so in that same tradition, we'll be presenting to you today. We also have another connection, a darker part of our history and context, and that where Northwestern is located, the city of Evanston is connected to John Evans, and who was one of the founders of Northwestern University, as well as the namesake of Evanston. He was the territorial governor of Colorado and superintendent of Indian Affairs during the Sand Creek Massacre. And for those not familiar, during the Sand Creek Massacre, there were around 200 mostly women and children injured, and as well as about 11 chief leaders of the Cheyenne and Arapaho tribes that were massacred during that day. And John Evans was the governor and superintendent, which means that Natives were under his care, and a violent environment, a hostile environment was set up, even though Sand Creek was a place where the Cheyenne and Arapaho were told that they would be safe from, and they had a white flag flying. So Northwestern hasn't really, and Evanston hasn't really engaged too much with this darker part of its history until recent years. In 2013, the Native American and Indigenous Student Alliance learned about this history, and so they created a petition and shared it that was asking the university to acknowledge and engage and take steps to heal from this part of its history. And it received a lot of attention, and the provost at the time commissioned the John Evans Study Committee, and they were charged with looking at the John Evans' role in the Sand Creek Massacre and if he had directly financially benefited from the massacre. And I like to share the story of, like, halfway through their research, the committee held an open forum, and it was like standing room only in this auditorium on campus, folks up and down the aisles and in the back. And one of the huge takeaways that came out of that open forum was that no matter what the study committee finds in its report, as it stands that day, Northwestern was not a welcoming and inclusive place for Native and Indigenous peoples. And so they had work to do regardless. And so they formed the Native American and Indigenous Task Force, which Pam served on, and they came up with a list of 60 recommendations. The photo of the folks in a circle is one of the listening sessions that the task force held with local Chicago Native community to hear their thoughts about what steps they thought and partnerships might look like with Northwestern and the local community. And so with those 60 recommendations, we did not have the critical mass that we do now, or that we're building now. And so they also appointed a Native American Leadership Council, which you see in the them standing there, which was 10 scholars, experts across various fields that would meet on an annual basis with our president, provost, and chief diversity officer to give us some advice on where to even begin this journey. Let's see. So I won't share too much more about the Sand Creek Massacre, but if you haven't done so already, there are two study reports, one out of Northwestern and the University of Denver, both institutions founded by John Evans, that you can read and learn more. And then to connect the Indigenous context to higher education, the American Indian College Fund published a list of declarations for Native purpose to support create visibility and healthy learning environments for Native students. And that included that Natives have a right to higher ed, that we have a duty to recognize traditional homelands, that they should have a place of belonging, that we should advocate for Indigenous knowledge, and have an ethic of care. Also, that includes systemic work at the senior leadership level, as well as the tribal sovereignty piece, which is very key and sets us apart from other racial categories. Although Native Americans are racialized, we also have a legal and political status within the country and trust responsibilities that need to be honored and through upholding tribal sovereignty. And so this is the declaration that we used to do the work at Northwestern. So we have the work of indigenizing the campus. And the role, the design, the framework that we used, you'll see here utilizing the medicine wheel with 4 main components, strategies, approaches to the work. And the first is relationship building. We are a relational peoples, and so that's very important to build strong, sustainable relationships with Native nations, institutions, in order to promote the understanding, the collaboration, and the healing. Second is visibility, which we'll talk a little bit more about, like moving from visibility to presence. And the thing that helps us with it is the relationships, knowledge, and people. But it's increasing that awareness of Indigenous worldviews, our experiences. That way it can enhance personal, collective, and institutional growth. The third is knowledge. This is really where the Center for Native and Indigenous Research comes in, but centering Indigenous ways of knowing, life ways, and research opportunities, really centering that and valuing that and supporting the advancement and creation of new Indigenous knowledge. And then finally, people, creating those pathways for current and future students, faculty, staff, and building that critical mass on campus.
Awesome. I appreciate that, Jasmine. And I want to emphasize that, you know, the work that we've done has been by design and not by accident. And so having this model that embraces the teachings of the four direction and being able to, I feel like some of the work that Jasmine and I do are like the engineers of this big vision. And so we do the details, which we're going to share some of that with you here today, but it really takes an orchestration of a lot of people and resources and a vision to get from one place to the other. So it's by design and not by accident. So let's talk a little bit about the visibility piece of our model. It's really important that we build visibility even on the campus. And I say, you know, we want to showcase our scholars that we have, the work that they're doing. We want to share the mission of our efforts under Indigenous initiatives, what our vision for a future might look like, and really important, the relevance of this work to everyone, all people that are on campus. We want to create excitement around it. We want to be inclusive of everyone, and we want to demonstrate that the work we're doing doesn't just have local impact. It's locally relevant, but it also has global impact. So making sure that we showcase the faces and the stories of our scholars, making sure we tell the story of the work that we're doing. So, I mean, being deliberate, saying that we're going to try to do one big story a year, we're going to do quarterly a story on this. We're out there. We take speaking opportunities like today with you to make sure that we're doing our part to increase that visibility of the work that's going on. And as a result, we've really gotten so much more enthusiasm, participation, and resources that we didn't even think we'd get. So we also, besides visibility on campus, we want visibility in communities. And that means getting out of our offices or our beautiful Evanston campus or downtown campus and getting into community. And we showed that even from the start with the task force, when we took the meeting off campus and went to the American Indian Center and engaged people in their own place. And we've done a lot of that through our work here. Patty Lowe, who was our inaugural director for the Center for Native American and Indigenous Research, would take her class at Medill every year, and still does, to an annual harvesting trip and have students engage with the community, actually bring value with their labor. You know, they would husk Oneida white corn, participate in the festival, learn the science behind it, learn about cooperative structures, and just hear stories from some of the people that they were engaged with in the work. It was a wonderful way to build community and make connections. The Indigenous STEAM camp that takes place here in Chicago every year, it's a wonderful place for the engagement of near peers. So some of our students, undergrads and grad students, volunteer, and some of them work to be counselors. Local Native families bring their children and they engage in science, technology, engineering, and math skills and develop relationships with each other. And in the midst of all that, they're conducting research on learning. And some of our grad students at the CESP are getting their PhDs in cognitive human learning, and they're doing it in relationship with the community. Again, that bringing value and being visible in communities. And they're getting to know our students in a way that they embrace them as part of the community. And then, of course, our work has impact in the world. So visibility and weighing in and lending our resources to the issues that our tribes and our Native communities care about. You know, one of our history professors, Doug Keel, he has been an expert witness. He's writing in his book that he's publishing. He's talking about the case of the Oneida Nation versus the village of Hobart. These are things that the community cares about, and resources through our scholarship that we're bringing, elevating our visibility in the world. They get called now, some of our professors get called to be participants in news clips, are quoted in stories. So getting that visibility of Northwestern and our Indigenous initiatives has been important. So I think I'm joining into the people here portion, or are you doing this one, Jasmine, I think?
Yes, so as we mentioned with people, is building that critical mass. Here's an example of all the many faces that you may run into on campus today. Many, if not most, all may not have been here 10 years ago. So this really has been in recent years of building up the critical mass across the different schools and units. And we have three main areas where we have staff roles specific to Indigenous initiatives, and that's with the Division of Student Affairs in Multicultural Student Affairs. And you'll see, well, you may or may not be able to see the small print, but there's 4 different student groups, undergrad, graduate, and professional schools. Currently, you also in the center is the a central unit, so Office of Institutional Diversity and Inclusion, where I'm situated, as well as our Office of Undergraduate Admissions falls under the Provost Office. And then the Center for Native American and Indigenous Research is housed under our School of Arts and Sciences. And CNAIR, as we refer to the research center, also has building on campus that has a library, a kitchen, study spaces, and an outdoor lawn. And this it plays such a pivotal role in having that sense of belonging and a place for gathering. It's very frequently used by students on campus, but also faculty and staff. They'll have their office hours there. It can be a meeting place. So the kitchen definitely is an important part of feeding community. And then the library houses a few donated native literature. So it is a very important resource on our campus. But also beyond just those core staff positions, it really takes all of us, a whole, I don't want to say army, but like just a village of folks across the different schools and units. This diagram is as an example of all of the different faculty affiliates that are connected to the research center that are doing work with Indigenous communities across the university that are engaged in supporting the mission of CNAIR. I don't know if Pam, if you want to add anything on that.
Well, I just, that old saying that says, start where you are, use what you have, and do what you can. We started with very, very little. And so this seems like a big sophisticated story, but, day by day, increment by increment, we've been able to build a circle around these efforts. And that's what it takes. This can't be shouldered by just a few people. It can't be, marginalized in one school or in one department or in one person. So I think we just wanted to show you visually that part of our strategy is to build.
The next, oh yeah.
I got a cough here.
The next is relationships. Again, very, very important. We have a focus on our own backyard, the urban Native communities. As I said, very active. We have a MOU with the Chicago American Indian Community Collaborative, which is that 16 different Native serving organizations and programs. We've hosted the American Indian Education Program through Chicago Public Schools on our campus. We're hosting them in a couple of weeks for their spring break. This picture to the left is actually the the Southeastern Oneida Tribal Office that's based out of Milwaukee. Their youth program came and visited our campus for the day. And then, of course, Chicago is home to the arguably the oldest urban American Indian center in the country. They're celebrating their 70th year, 70th anniversary this year. And so those definitely make sense for us to have relationships with the Indigenous folks that live in our own city. We also outreach to the Great Lakes tribes in the region. Here's a photo of middle school girls that we hosted on our campus for the weekend around a stellar STEM weekend where it was all about science, technology, engineering, and math. We got to visit the lab space, make ice cream with the liquid nitrogen, and check out the telescope. And yeah, just have a nice weekend and exposure to our campus. And then on the right side is my favorite example of what like an economic partnership looks like with a tribal entity. So when Northwestern did the renovation of their Welsh Ryan arena, basketball arena, they procured lumber from the Menominee tribe. In Wisconsin, they have over 100-year-old lumber industry that is 100% sustainable, and it just met so many of our shared goals. And so now the fabric of our institution now has our Menominee grandfather trees and our grandfather trees returning home, because these are Menominee homelands here. So the photo there is our former president, an alum, Menominee alum, and then the president of the Menominee Tribal Enterprise, as well as the chairman. So the head of state of Menominee came down and received basketball, were presented during the opening game. Very proud moment for me. And then we also, besides the local area, our institution has that connection to the Cheyenne and Arapaho tribes. And so reaching and partnership building with them is very important. So you have a photo of the Sand Creek Massacre site where we've taken students and staff to the site to visit the site on an annual basis. It's been disrupted a little because of COVID. But also on the top right photo is students from Chief Dull-Knife College, which is a tribal college located on Northern Cheyenne Reservation. We're able to visit our campus, and we host an annual commemoration of the Sand Creek Massacre every November. And pre-COVID, we would invite descendants of the Sand Creek Massacre to come and speak and share more and help the university learn, understand, and engage, and then also learn about what Cheyenne and Arapaho communities are up to today, because they don't only exist in the past, they have efforts that they're working on, language, revitalization, etc., that it's important, and they think it's important for us to also know about that too.
Yeah, you've taken students to their annual youth run, correct?
Yes, yeah. So they used to hold an annual healing walk run from the site of the Sand Creek Massacre to Denver. It's about 300 miles, but they do that run annually to heal that trail where the soldiers, trigger warning, had taken the body parts and paraded them through that into the Capitol. And so it's so important for them to have their youth to walk that trail, run that trail, to heal that from their ancestors. So they do that on an annual basis. They're again, COVID disrupted a lot of things. Some of the tribes have done a virtual run, but I believe they're going to be picking that back up this year.
So Jasmine, I just want to stop right in for a second and say that what's been so notable to me is the generosity and love of the people that you've engaged with. Like, this isn't, I mean, yes, it's a horrific past, and one that, we have to tell the truth about. that had not been talked about in our institution for years and years and years, ever really, until recently. But it has resulted in some of the deepest loving relationships with some of these tribal members. I know Otto has been a mentor and a friend to you and guided you in this difficult work. They've shared their story generously. They have not come after us in a mad way. They've come after us with truly healing, being at the forefront of their interests. They want their community to heal and to thrive. And they'd like us to help them with that, right? To be a part of that.
Yeah.
I just want to say that because I think some people would be afraid about what this means, but it actually has been so empowering.
I had the opportunity to spend some time with Otto just a couple weeks ago after 3 years of not seeing him, and he just reminded me how it might be really hard and taxing and exhausting to talk about a massacre, but for him it's also healing. So that is part of that healing work. It doesn't always feel, pretty and nice, but it's important for him to be able to tell the story in order to heal. And so, again, the generosity really is, maybe most days doesn't feel deserving, but I'm just so appreciative for that, and want to make sure that I do right by that. They're willing to engage and help us along.
And I've also found that whether we're interviewing potential faculty or staff to join us, if they know about our past, if we speak truthfully about it and talk about the proactive ways we're dealing with it, that actually is a winning point. They accept it and appreciate it. So it's not something that we have to hold secret, because I think I've run across that a few times where people are like, don't talk about that on the first date. Well, no, I think if we can speak truth and own it and move forward from it, it's been a powerful message. Thank you.
So partnerships, these are just a list of some examples of partnerships that we've created just in the last year or two with both local, regional, and national Native nations, institutions, and communities.
Yes, relationships take time and energy. And so it has to be, again, deliberate and by design to maintain relationships. And I'm going to talk about knowledge, which I think is probably the most difficult piece of our story. We said early on that, some of the work we did, although it's not that easy, was easier than this piece. And ultimately, as higher education institutions, we are about knowledge building, knowledge sharing, preparing leaders for the next generation. And so the knowledge piece has to be there. This isn't just a practice of diversity and inclusion. It's about building knowledge at our institutions. And so I've also found it the most difficult, and maybe partially because I'm not an academic. I mean, my role has really been one of building up community and Native professionals, and not necessarily running these big institutions. This is my first time in a big institution since I was very young. But we have a responsibility to create a safe space for that knowledge building. And I think we'll talk a little bit later about some of the challenges that we've had. And I'm just going to give you an example, and it's very exciting, about some of the kind of knowledge building that's been happening here. Let me talk a little bit first about the Monoman project. So this project is, there's a big consortium of people that include University of Minnesota, Twin Cities, Purdue University, Argonne National Labs, University of Wisconsin, and we had done some preliminary relationship building with Bad River, Lac du Flambeau, Fond du Lac, and the Mille Lacs tribes, way in advance of proposing a project like this. We did listening sessions and built a project together based on the needs of the tribe, driven by those needs, and what skill sets we had with our interested parties here at Northwestern. And through that work, a couple of projects have emerged. And this one is really near and dear to my heart as a Menominee, which means people of the wild rice. This project seeks to work with local tribes to talk about climate change and its impact on this very important food staple. Monoman is the wild rice, and it informs, it informs a lot of the cultural aspects, the subsistence. I mean, are we Menominee if we don't have any wild rice anymore? It's core to who we are as a people. And the same for the Ojibwe people. The project was funded at the tune of $5 million over the next 5 years by the National Science Foundation. It's going to develop some new methods to help mitigate the effects of climate change on the Great Lakes and its surrounding natural ecosystem. It partners with Indigenous and Native scientists, conservation agencies, and government agencies, and the team focuses on the Monoman, which is the word for wild rice. It's critical yet declining part of the Great Lakes ecosystem, and it's definitely a sacred food that connects Natives communities to the land. Professor Josiah Hester, who is now adjunct faculty here, this is one of 5 coastline and people hubs that's funded by NSF, and it's the first time that a hub's been funded in the Great Lakes region. It's a very exciting project, and we've got grad students working on it. Several discipline schools working on it. We've got Weinberg professors, McCormick professors. This is a very exciting project unfolding, but it's taken years to get to this place.
And I'll just chime in and say, like, when Pam speaks to the challenges about knowledge, sometimes when folks hear about this research, it's I don't know, I won't say how it makes me feel, but one of the questions that we get 99% of the time is like, what does this have to do with me? And when they hear Native, they just think it just only affects such a small percentage. But actually, wild rice, Monoman, is a sentinel species for the Great Lakes. And so I learned what that word means. It really is an indicator for the health of this, one of the largest freshwater bodies in the world. And so this does affect more than just, Native peoples, but everybody is made of water, so water is life.
It is, and to when you have to build up trust with the people, you have to have a data sovereignty plan. You need to make sure that we're following cultural protocols. It's just been a glorious thing to see unfolding, and we learn every day from it. Another project we're working in partnership with is a project called Woven Being. And it's through Indigenous curatorial methodologies that are going to prioritize collaborations, reciprocity, and sustained dialogue, and expand an intergenerational community of Indigenous knowledge shares and non-Indigenous allies. It's going to focus on the Chicagoland area, and will speak to the interwovenness of Indigenous art, materials, and time in the Chicago region. The artworks will engage themes including kinship between materials, relations across regional waters and landways, and weaving together the past, the present, and the future. And what's so beautiful about this project and the way that the Block Museum is approaching it is they are open and willing to think about the way that they have been practicing curatorial practices and indigenizing them, being inclusive. They have an amazing series of community dialogues and discussions, and it's just been really a wonderful thing to see unfolding. And they expect that it's not just going to result in an amazing exhibit that's due to open in 24, but they also believe it's going to change the way that they practice. And that's right. This is knowledge building. This isn't just having a joint event. And the last project I'm going to just talk about a little bit is about the Tribal Constitutions Project. This is a partnership between the Professor of Law, Aaron Delaney, and Northwestern Assistant Professor of Sociology, Beth Redbird. And they are joining forces, and they have, again, the support of a large NSF grant. But it's going to result in one of the largest collections of tribal constitutions and amendments that have ever been assembled. More than 1,000 records from 304 tribes that span 150 years. This is amazing work. And they are doing this because they believe constitutions represent how people see themselves, what they see as important, what they care about protecting, and how they see the role of citizens in their societies. So tribal constitutions are a snapshot of the tension between what Native American values are and the level of autonomy and self-determination that they've secured in practice. So the new records that they're collecting are going to shed light on the origins of tribal constitutions, citizenship, rights, and legislative power in the continental United States. And we've already seen that Native tribal communities are at the forefront of a lot of environmental protections because of their treaties and their constitutions. They hold a kind of a special power in influencing policy and legislation. So this is really an important work and is going to, again, be beneficial and driven by tribal communities. Very proud of that one. We also realized as we were engaging, you saw that circle of many scholars from almost every school at Northwestern stepping up, and they're at various levels of experience. Some are very new and don't really understand Indigenous methodology or what it means to work in partnership with Native communities. Maybe they haven't done any community engaged research. So we have an obligation to help prepare anyone who finds this work interesting. So we've been offering this year a focus on Indigenous methodology through a brown bag series. We have presenters. There's a few more coming up. Friday, April 28th, there's one, and Thursday, May 25th, there's another, and that'll end our season for this academic year. But we've had external speakers like Dr. Amanda Ticini, and we've had internal speakers like grad student Forrest Bruce. These have been wonderful, so you can see how they're applying Indigenous methodologies in their work, and they're willing to share, and that networking between scholars, they get feedback and ideas from each other, and that's where some of the ideas for collaborations might come from. So we're going to continue to invest in the Northwestern community of scholars that find this work interesting. And lastly, for knowledge, teaching and learning happens at this institution of higher education. And so if folks are interested in projects, how do we prepare them? And so we were successful in implementing in 2020 a NACE minor, Native American Indigenous Studies minor. And we've graduated a number of students from it. And there's just been a swelling of interest. We've had 32 NACE courses offered in 2020 and 2021 combined. And this is interesting. Again, I'm going to say that this huge village that we've amassed is not because we had a ton of money that we were dishing out. This is really about the interest and resources of others that have lifted up and joined the initiatives. These I think we have, in a recent study, our director found that we only have 2 contracted faculty that are committed to teaching 2 NACE courses. The rest of these courses are taught because of the interest of the faculty and the interest of the department. And I think that's part of promoting excitement and being inclusive in these initiatives and helping people, resourcing them so they can also resource us. It really takes us moving together, and we do have vision for a full major down the road. Right now the courses are organized by 4 main areas: global indigeneity, creative expression, the natural world, and the social world. And Professor Beatrice Reyes, who's in global health, coordinates the minor for us. And there's a picture of one of our recent grads from 22 who graduated with the NACE minor. And lastly, again, this is investing in individuals that want to do this work, and helping them, whether it's through a fellowship where there's, for faculty, we have the summer or course buyout, summer salary or course buyout, where they can add Indigenous pieces to their work or immerse or learn. And then we also have grad student and undergrad student fellowships where they can, pay for things that maybe, like in the case in the middle, Jordan Gurneau, who's a graduate student in McCormick School of Engineering. He's working on the Monoman project, but he had never really harvested wild rice, and he thought it was very important to his work that he develop a relationship with the wild rice. And so his fellowship allowed him to travel. What reservation was it, Jasmine?
Leech Lake.
Leech Lake. Yeah, Leech Lake, and participate in actual harvesting of the wild rice, creating a relationship with whatever cultural protocols were necessary, learning about it, all the trials and tribulations, all the bugs that are in them, and how labor intensive it is to prepare that rice. But through that relationship, he felt it would make him better in the research that he's engaging in with the communities in a much more genuine and intimate way. So we support those kind of fellowships. Yeah.
All right, so this work is not without its challenges. I think one of the things that we've mentioned already is just about how Indigenous knowledge is undervalued. It's not about diversity and just getting, different folks in the seats at the table, but really about like what are the values and knowledges that are being centered and uplifted and supported.
And I will just add a real practical experience that we have had, as we have interviewed Indigenous scholars here on campus. Often the departments they're associated with don't have, like, this might be a top scholar in the Indigenous arena. In fact, they're leaders in Indigenous knowledge, and they come to our university, and most of the folks interviewing them don't have any experience with that. And they end up feeling undervalued and judged by people who don't even know a lot about the work that they're doing. And it's, how are we going to attract that top Native talent if we're not ready on our end to understand their work? It's played out like that. And if you are a scholar and you've got a vision for the kind of scholarly work you're going to do, and you're in an environment that's not supportive of it, doesn't have enough students, they don't understand what you're doing, they don't value it, it definitely affects their interest in coming to join our team. So this is definitely a place where, again, these projects I'm hoping will help excite others and, make this a place where our knowledge can thrive.
Another point is that sovereignty piece. Again, sometimes in like DEI efforts, Native folks are overlooked. But then if we are engaged or included, we're treated as just a racial category without understanding of that sovereignty piece, that government to government relations, especially when the research center and faculty are trying to create research partnerships with sovereign nations and the tribes. There's a lot of systems and policies in place that don't afford those partnerships and don't understand them, and maybe just are dismissive, and we lose out on a lot of opportunities because of our lack of understanding of how to navigate with tribal sovereignty.
Yes, you're right. It's complicated. Sometimes it's the legislature, sometimes it's the cultural committee, sometimes it's the education department. Just understanding how tribal entities work sometimes is also an important part of this part.
Yeah. And then we included leadership turnover because I feel like 60% of my work is just doing that Native 101, teaching about like who Natives are, the sovereignty piece, blood quantum, boarding schools, just like we exist today. There's different tribes with different tribal languages, and 60% of that time is spent just catching folks up to speed. And then I'm left with 40% of that time on actually getting to like the core of what my vision, what my dream, what the work that needs to be done. And so when you have you spend time onboarding leadership and getting them to have understanding, and then when there's turnover, it's really hard to like start that work again with new leadership that's coming in.
So true. And let's be clear, in our efforts to date, we've had a change in president, a change in provost, and a change in our chief diversity officer, all within a short period of time. And that top leadership support, now we're working on reestablishing that institutional knowledge again.
Yeah. The outreach and inclusion task force was, I believe, was very successful because it was co-chaired by the board, the chairman of the board of trustees and the vice president of student affairs at the time, and then was made up of faculty, staff, students, administrators, and not just the Native faculty and staff, or especially students who are, their time is limited. And so it was a great mix, and they met over the course of a year. And a lot of that time, again, was like just getting a basic understanding, but that time and that onboarding was so important to now like build the multiple champions of this work. And for the folks that are still on our campus today, they really do continue to be champions and advocating for us when we're not in the room. They know the understanding. They can, if they don't know the answers, they know something's off and connect with one of us and we get involved. And so that groundwork was so important for our success. We, of course, like the pathways and investment of recruiting Native and Indigenous students. Again, we're not just another racial category. Really, efforts in outreach look differently, and a lot of the times it's our small population size is easily dismissed when really, again, we like have to fight to see how this is relevant to everybody, and we matter, whether there's 1 or 500. And then also there are institutions, Northwestern's private, but we do have this connection with our founder. But a lot of land grant institutions, they exist because of that, that the Moral Act, and basically Indigenous lands were used to seed the foundation of their university. And so, but with that was a responsibility to then educate Natives. And so you're seeing, I feel like I've been seeing in recent years a lot of institutions, like the whole California system is now offering free tuition to Native Americans. Michigan has done it, Minnesota. So there's a lot of universities now that are fulfilling or start beginning to fulfill that responsibility as a land grant institution. The physical indoor and outdoor space, we are place-based people.
Yes.
Place is so important to us to connect, but also it provides visibility at the same time. When I see Native and Indigenous on a physical building, it signals presence, my presence, that I belong there, but also connection. We're place-based people. We need.
And given the numbers are still small, there has to be, the research has shown that an important intervention in higher education is to create that safe space where Natives are not the only with each other, and they don't have to do the Indian 101 to everybody. So I find here on Fridays when we have, and I'm tuning in from the Native Senior House on campus, and on Fridays there's a lot of laughter, a lot of snacking, just a safe place for them to be who they are. That's so important. And outdoor space is critical because of the cultural aspects of relationship with land. And right now, that's been a hard thing to get here on campus. I know everybody fights over the space inside the buildings, but we want to fight for the space outside too. We hold a lot of our programming outside with a fire pit and, blankets on the ground. It's just, it's part of the culture, and there's sometimes policies and regulations that keep that from happening easily here.
Yeah, you see that on there, the incompatible infrastructure that just clashes and makes the work that we're trying to do hard, and sometimes for maybe not the most clearest reason. But also, I don't want to skip over the backlash from success. We unfortunately have received some backlash when we've had particularly successful or visible moments. So in 2020, we built and launched a birch bark canoe into Lake Michigan. It was such a beautiful process of like Evanstonians and Chicagoans all coming together to physically build a traditional birch bark canoe, which was then launched in the waters on a like very misty, gloomy, rainy October morning, but we still had 100+ people on that lake with like multiple media outlets and their cameras there. We got front page of the Tribune, and like the week later, or even days later, actually, our undergraduate students had decorated the rock on our campus in celebration of Native Heritage Month, and you see the photo here. Within like 30 hours, their design had been vandalized, crossed out. Their messages about, bringing our children home with the children in the mass graves that they're finding at boarding schools, and missing and murdered Indigenous women. They had put Ojibwe, no way, so definitely like hate speech, very targeted vandalism, but the Ojibwe, after we just hosted this Ojibwe canoe maker, it just seemed like right as we were all on this high of being visible and celebrating and revitalizing traditional practices, engaging the larger community, the students' design and celebration of Native Heritage Month had been vandalized in such a targeted way. Yeah. Want to add anything?
No, I just, I also, as an organizer, it was an opportune moment for the students who rose up, not in anger, but they joined hands with an amazing group of allies that showed up at like 10 p.m. the next day, and they held hands in a round dance by that rock and recommitted to a vision of a safe and inclusive place on this campus. Again, the generosity and the grace never ceases to amaze me. And all of the allyship that was demonstrated just made us even stronger. The students organized and had a meeting with the president and the provost, and, they recommitted, all of them, to a future. So I appreciate that. But yes, it seems that the backlash from success, it happens.
And it was also just a reminder that there's still work to do, that, we had a lot to celebrate, but our work is certainly not done. And so for the students to reach out to the senior administrators to just be able to share how this had impacted them. It was also parent weekend, so some of their parents who have been impacted by boarding schools witnessed this. It was made worse by Northwestern police telling one of the Ojibwe students that that it was not offensive. It was not the vandalism was worse alone, but there were the reactions to it exacerbated the situation, and was just a reminder that there is still a lot of work to be done, and to just stay grounded in our indigeneity and in our values as Indigenous peoples, and the fact that the students, they came together in song and dance and wanted to have a circle with senior admin. It was nice to have those tools and that support.
And, thinking about the incompatible infrastructure that clashes with practice, I think of a few funny, well, they're not really funny, but, when we are working with elders in the community and, again, our former director, Patty Lowe, who did a lot of her work in community, engaging with elders, which is important, cultural protocol, would want to pay them an honorarium, but we pay in a check and they don't have a bank account, or to go to a bank, it's a 35-mile drive. So, how do we engage community in the places where they're at? How do we, I know there were some other situations that would occur, just things that you didn't plan on or expect. We had to, for making the canoe, we had to be able to have outdoor space to cut and shave the ribs for the canoe out of cedar. And it created this huge mess in the area, which, okay, now how do we pick that up? We had to find a place to immerse birch bark in water. And so we had to put it in under showers in the Weinberg in Kresge, and then spend 3 hours, the director and I, mopping the hallway. There's just some things that we want to do that are part of the work, and we don't have the capacity, and we have to make do or figure it out. There was one other time we had to soak the cedar ribs for the canoe, and we didn't have anything big enough, and thank goodness McCormick school came through, and we were able to sink them with some cement packages into one of the river simulators in the water department. That was like a last minute fix, thank goodness, because it would have impacted our production. So just, sometimes, we're trying to build a outdoor wigwam as a teaching lodge, which many other universities have done across the country. But we can't seem to get it done here at Northwestern because of building codes of Evanston, supposedly. And, okay, now we spend how many meetings and how much time trying to get through these bureaucracies to do something that is really an important part of what we deliver here on campus. So that kind of incompatible infrastructure is what we're talking about. And the bottom line, you missed that last one. In some ways, Northwestern's still not ready for the kind of community partnerships we say we want. We are inviting to the inauguration of the new president. We are inviting some Native dignitaries, And we're going to work hard to make sure that when they're received, they're treated with the head of state positions that they hold. If legislators are coming, and that we make sure their experience with us is respectful and at the caliber that it needs to be. And so we need to have some practice runs at this too.
And I try to be forefront with students that are considering Northwestern. Is like, if you're excited to join a place that is still building out its infrastructure and its system, you aren't coming into something that has been established for decades, but if you're excited by, the opportunity to maybe shape and influence what that looks like and help us build it out, just trying to be more transparent about like where Northwestern's at in our journey.
So we think the really needs something we worry about is not replicating boarding school harm and assimilating our communities in ways that are harmful. But so how do we, instead of thinking, how can we, what can we do for Native Americans and Indigenous students to make them fit and be successful here, to how can we create an institution that fosters their development and growth, that honors Indigenous knowledge building and builds trust with their community and their families. How can we be good partners? And, I like to say we have a lot going for us. We really do. As critical as we can be of our institution, we're also very excited and committed to this family and proud of the accomplishments and committed to making the next level of changes we need to. But we're proud. We think being here in the Midwest and right on this beautiful lake is definitely just ideal. We have strong relationships with the Midwest. Wisconsin, Minnesota, Michigan. This large Native community right in our backyard, one of the largest in the country, 9th largest in the country, and over 126 different tribes represented, has an amazing history, as Jasmine started off with, of, confluence of arts and knowledge and politics, and so much has occurred here, and it continues to be an important place in Indian country. And we think because of these things, we can attract top-notch Indigenous faculty, students, and undergrads. But we have to be able to demonstrate that we want them and that this is a place that will support them in their community. And, the bottom line is we do believe and continue to believe that this is a place where Natives can thrive.
And with that, and thank you.
Yep, we've shared our links to our web pages, which has been shared in the chat. Encourage you to learn more, and all of our programs are inclusive. So never eliminate yourself from something you see. We want you to come. We want you to participate. Everyone is welcome. And
you'll often see even little ones of just all ages at our events too. We definitely are family friendly.
Yes. And you want to share a couple of upcoming events?
Yeah. Our Native American and Indigenous Student Alliance has been working hard to plan for their 2nd annual traditional spring powwow on Saturday, April 22nd. It'll be at the Welsh Ryan Arena, which has the Menominee lumber there. So you get to see it in person, free. Everyone's welcome. Bring your families. And then
there's a couple more events if you're interested in seeing more about our research, and our fellows are presenting their research. We're having a language panel to kick off the decade of international Indigenous languages. And then we are hosting a 2-week artist in residency with Noel Garcia. And both of these things are posted on the CNAIR website as well. We welcome you to both.
Pamala and Jasmine, it's insufficient to affirm just how incredibly informative and inspiring this was. And this was incredibly informative and inspiring. Thank you. We're humbled that you've spent this time with us today and sharing so much about the work that has taken place, the many efforts and the many exciting possibilities and going forward. A few questions from me, and let me again invite our participants to feel free to use the Q&A tab at the bottom. First of all, as you were speaking about relationships and the work of connecting, I'm thinking about the potential relationship between the many efforts you named and Garrett-Evangelical. We share space, we share histories, oftentimes at tragic points. And this past year, we've begun to share in some work together as Garrett has begun a process of accounting for its history, accounting for its role in the settler colonial project, accounting for its role as part of a religious tradition and as part of a set of religious institutions which justified theologically, spiritually, politically, morally the terrible histories of this region of the Americas. We also share deep hope, deep aspirations for the work of healing, the work of justice making, healing of communities, healing of landscapes, healing of cultural traditions. And so I guess the invitation would be to think openly, imaginatively with us about what you see when you look at Garrett-Evangelical and you think about the potential role that a seminary ally might play in some of the work that you've shared here. So that's a bit open-ended, but would be thrilled to hear just some of your initial thoughts about what a relationship, what allyship, what mutual support might look like going forward.
Well, I will say participating, I'm going to jump in, participating on the work group has been wonderful because you do have a core group of leaders across the country who are leading thought in this area. I've been super impressed. So I feel like we're starting from such a small, very small insular group, and you have already a network that you've been mobilizing through the whole United Methodist Church in general, right? You have some church leaders and that are very seasoned at doing this and have lent their support. So I've benefited from that. I also think, definitely we're neighbors. We do share a parcel of land. And so the history and some of the assets that I mentioned that we have at our disposal that make us, prime for doing this work are yours as well. And so I hope we continue to be neighbors and, what do you say? My house is your house. Programs we offer to the public are open to your community as well. And if we need to figure out a better way to communicate that, let's work on that. But I also feel that some of the work that we've done initially was about what's right and justice and things like that. And at an institution like Northwestern, sometimes that doesn't roll out very well. It's about the research dollars. It's about, the scholarship and, how we compete with the other academic institutions in our league. And so I almost feel like your efforts could take hold a lot faster and easier than ours have. And so I hope when we presented this model of what we think the major elements that are needed, I hope that it is a recipe that you can take and start to implement. And I bet if you take stock of some of these major categories, the visibility, the people, the knowledge and the relationships, that you could probably map out that you have a lot of these things in place. And now getting others excited about it, and sharing that, and actually being very deliberate in building those pieces out, seemed to be just a really natural next step, and might actually be easier than we've experienced.
Yeah. Just add that quote you shared earlier, like start with what you got, where you're at.
Yeah.
I see, I would like to invite my colleague, Dr. Kate Ott, to ask another question.
Thank you both so much. This was so helpful. And I'm going to ask a question that might be on the minds of some folks who are participating in the webinar, thinking about visibility, about knowledge, people, place, about changing that as well for those of us like Dr. Eberhardt and the folks at Garrett who want to engage in this work. I hear you very openly welcoming folks to come to events, to increase our knowledge, to learn together, to meet people, experience place in a new way. I wonder, I hear that welcome, but I know in my own heart, I have a hesitation of not wanting to also bring my own whiteness into that experience in a negative way and come sort of as a voyeur to those types of experiences. So what would you say to folks on this call who want to come, who want to learn how to approach that? And then maybe even some very simple things like, if you come to the powwow, here's what you might expect, but also here's what we expect of you as a guest coming to that. And perhaps maybe even, Jasmine, I know you've shared with me and I've shared with the Garrett community, the 7th annual Urban Native Education Conference happening just in Skokie. So maybe even to say something about that.
Yes, I really appreciate the that question. I know when I've given presentations, I do a land acknowledgement training for our campus, and some students have been like, well, we need to like really do our homework before we do. And I kind of push back on that a little bit. Like, I'm not an expert. I wouldn't consider myself an expert. Like this is a learning journey. But I think it's very important to come with humility, and just as humans, first. And also, I think like knowledge exchange happens a little bit differently, where you don't just get to freely ask, all the questions. So if you're at a powwow or if you're at a ceremony or something, you just, when you're supposed to learn, the knowledge will come to you when it's supposed to. And so I would just say that humility is going to be a big piece. But to the powwow, my office is hosting a powwow 101 workshop. It's via Zoom, April 19th over the lunch hour, just to share the basic components of what make up a powwow, what you can expect. We'll have a little time at the end for like open Q&A about like, how do I engage? But the MCs at the powwows actually do a really good job at explaining like what's happening now, if you should stand, when photos are allowed or not. So their role is really informative, as long as you're, keeping an ear out for that. But yes, this is, I'll pause there.
Yeah, I think that's right. In most cases, if you're willing to be open and to some learning, then that's great. And we don't do it in the same way that like I have a right to know everything that's happening here, but people will share, like the MC Jasmine's talking about at the powwow, will definitely share the knowledge and the protocols as needed. And over time, right? Maybe the first time you didn't quite get it all, but please come back. And over time, you'll establish those relationships and trust. And the one thing I like, even at my age, when those old aunties come up or those old grandmas and say, kiddo, you weren't supposed to do that. And I welcome that. We're all students. And I think there's so much to be said for your your intent and your humility and just, that you care. I mean, that means the world to us. And you can tell that in a person within a few, like, I'm here because I care. I am here because I'm interested. We welcome that. That's why we're putting it on. We want you to come. We want you to be interested. We want you to care.
And I shared 2 links. One is to the 7th Annual Urban Education Conference. This is hosted by the Chicago American Indian Community Collaborative. It's around the urban education experience, broadly construed. We'll have a great keynote and breakout sessions, but that can be a chance to come and learn more. It's something that we've done a lot of work towards planning, and it's free to attend, so definitely welcome anyone. That's free, that April 15th at the Illinois Holocaust Museum and Education Center. And then the other link is to the Powwow 101 workshop. It's via Zoom. You can register. The link to register is on there as well.
Pamela and Jasmine, thank you for all that you've shared with us today and the spirit of generosity out of which you've done so. We really are so grateful for the beginning partnership and relationships that have formed this past year, and are hopeful for the ways that we can continue to build, share, and work together. I also want to thank Dr. Kate Ott and the STED Center for co-sponsoring not just this webinar, but the series. Again, be sure to take a look at the STED Center page in the coming weeks for some additional opportunities to learn with and alongside Pamela and Jasmine. And many thanks to all of you today who were a participant and those who will be viewing this webinar in its recorded form. We will be posting this on Garrett's Indigenous Study Committee webpage, which, if possible, perhaps we could share that link as well, again, in the chat. And we hope that you'll feel free to share this with others, with other networks, that many beyond just those who've joined today might learn from and gain the benefit of the wisdom from Pamela and Jasmine. We will have one more webinar in this series next month. That will be with Elaine Enns and Chet Myers. Elaine is another member of Garrett's Indigenous Study Committee, and they will be sharing with us on possibilities for reparative action, particularly for Christian communities, institutions, churches, in relationship to Native and Indigenous peoples. Again, that will be next month with Elaine Enns and Chet Myers. So again, many thanks to all of you. Blessings for this day and a word of encouragement for the good work that is ahead.
Thanks again for having us.